My narcissistic parents told my golden child brother that he could take my house and I could just live in a camper because I'm single and he has a wife and kids. And I want to tell you about the 11 minutes during which the family figured out the house had been in my name for 4 years, and that my dead grandfather had been the most strategic man any of them had ever known. My brother is Hendrik. Hendrik is 36. I am 33. Hendrik has been the favorite for as long as I have been alive. The house was my grandfather Augustus's house. Augustus died 4 years ago at 81. Augustus had been the only person in our family who had seen through Hendrik. Augustus had also been the only person who had seen me. The house was a 5-bedroom colonial worth about $910,000 now. Augustus left the house to me. He left it with 3 conditions written into the will by an estate attorney named Patrice Lemoine, who had been Augustus's friend for 30 years. The first condition was that I had to live in the house for 5 years before I could sell it. The second was that the house could not be transferred to any family member at any time. The third was a sealed letter that Patrice had been instructed to read aloud at any family meeting at which my ownership was challenged. I had been living in the house for 4 years and 1 month when the family meeting happened. The dinner was attended by my parents, Hendrik, Hendrik's wife Marisol, their 3 kids, and me. My mother said, "Honey, we have been thinking about the family arrangements. Hendrik has been needing more space for his growing family. Augustus's house has 5 bedrooms. It makes more sense for Hendrik to be there. You are single. You do not need that space." My father said, "There is a perfectly good camper in the back of the property. You could fix it up. You would have your independence." Hendrik was smiling. Marisol was smiling. The plan had clearly been workshopped. I let them finish. My mother asked when I could be out of the house. I asked her if she would like me to call Patrice Lemoine to clarify a few details about Augustus's estate. My mother said, "Honey, we already worked that out with Augustus before he died. It is just paperwork." I said, "Okay, let me call her." I had Patrice's number in my phone. I had been keeping it ready for 4 years. I dialed on speakerphone. Patrice answered on the second ring. Patrice said, "Hello, honey, are we doing this today?" I said, "Yes, Patrice. Please tell my parents what you told me 4 years ago." Patrice walked them through it. The will, the 5-year condition, the transfer prohibition, the sealed letter. My mother went pale. My father did not speak. Hendrik said, "This cannot be right." Patrice said, "It is right." Augustus had been very specific. Augustus had specifically anticipated this exact conversation happening. I asked Patrice to read the sealed letter. The letter was 11 minutes long when read aloud. The letter had been written by Augustus 3 years before his death. The letter described in specific detail the family pattern Augustus had observed for 61 years. The letter named 27 specific incidents with dates. The letter described Augustus's decision to leave the house to me as a strategic act of family realignment. The letter ended with the line, "If you are hearing this read aloud, it is because my daughter and son-in-law have done exactly what I knew they would do." The family was silent. Marisol cried first because Marisol had been not knowing about the family pattern and was learning it in real time. Hendrik tried to argue. Patrice cut him off and reminded him the will had been probated. The document was final, and any challenge would be both unsuccessful and an opportunity for me to seek attorney's fees. I told my parents I loved them. I told them I would be choosing how often I saw them going forward. I told them the choosing had been overdue. I left the dinner. 3 days after that dinner, my mother sent a group text, not to me, to the extended family. I was included in the thread, which I think was on purpose because my mother has never accidentally done anything in her life. The text said that I had humiliated my parents in front of the grandchildren. It said I had hired a lawyer to ambush my own family at a peaceful Sunday dinner. It said Augustus had been confused in his final years, and that his decisions did not reflect the man he really was. Kenya rewrote the entire evening in one long message. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls from aunts and uncles I barely talked to. One aunt asked me, "Why would you do this to your mother?" An uncle left a voicemail that said, "Your grandfather would be ashamed of how you acted." Every single one of them had gotten Kenya's version first, and Kenya's version was the only version they were ever going to believe. I did not answer a single one of those calls. Instead, I called Marisol. She picked up on the first ring. I said, "Did you see the text?" Marisol said, "I saw it. I've been staring at it for 20 minutes trying to figure out how someone can lie that well in a group chat." I asked her how Hendrik was doing. Marisol got quiet for a second. Then she said, "He hasn't said a word about it. Not one word. That scares me more than if he were yelling." Then she told me something that changed how I saw her. She said, "I've been reading that letter's contents over and over in my head. Your grandfather described things I've been noticing for years but didn't have words for." She said she had seen it at holidays. She had seen the way my parents would light up when Hendrik walked in and just sort of nod when I arrived. She said hearing it read out loud by Patrice, with dates and details going back decades, had made her feel sick because she realized she had been watching it happen and calling it normal. By the end of that conversation, Marisol had become the first person inside my family who was fully on my side. The next morning, I called Patrice. I told her about the group text. I asked her if this kind of pressure could ever turn into something legal. Patrice laughed, a tired one. She said, "Honey, I drafted that will like a fortress. Nobody is taking that house." Then her voice got serious. She said, "The legal part is settled. The emotional part is where they'll try to bleed you. Don't let them. Your grandfather knew that too. That's why he wrote the letter. The letter was his way of fighting the emotional battle for you even after he was gone." Thursday evening, I was making dinner when I noticed a shadow on the front porch through the window by the door. I walked over and looked through the glass and saw my father standing there. Zephyr was just standing on the porch. He was not knocking. He was not ringing the bell. I opened the door and he looked at me, and I saw something in his face I had never seen before. He looked old, like something had been drained out of him in the past week. He said, "Your mother hasn't slept in 4 days." I did not say anything. He said, "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to ask you to come to one more dinner, just to talk. No ambush." My father has never come to see me alone, not once in 33 years. And now here he was on my porch by himself, asking me for one more chance. I knew it was probably a bad idea, but he looked so tired. So I said yes. I said, "One dinner, one conversation. If it turns into what the last one turned into, I'm leaving and I'm not coming back." Zephyr nodded. He said, "That's fair." After his taillights disappeared down the street, I went back inside. I opened the drawer next to the stove, the one Augustus used to keep his butterscotch candies in. In the back, there were still 3 candies left. They were wrapped in gold foil that had gotten a little dull. I picked one up and held it in my palm. It was so light. I thought about Augustus sitting at this this table, unwrapping one of these candies every morning after his coffee. I thought about the fact that he spent 3 years writing that letter. He had known exactly what his family would do, and he had loved me enough to spend 3 years of his life building a wall around my future anyway. I put the candy back in the drawer. I did not unwrap it. I just wanted to know it was still there. The second dinner came the following Sunday. Same house, same table, but the energy was different the second I walked in. Kenya was already sitting down, which was unusual because my mother always greets people at the door so she can control the first moment of every interaction. Hendrik was sitting across from the empty chair that was clearly meant for me. He was alone. No Marisol, no kids. Marisol had called me earlier that day and said, I told Hendrik I wasn't coming. I told him I love him, but I can't sit at that table and pretend what happened last week was normal. The 3 kids were not there either. Drake, Aoif, and Elmer were at a neighbor's house. I sat down and waited. Then Kenya did something I did not expect. She started crying. Real crying. The kind that changes your breathing and makes your voice shake. She looked at me and said, my father never thought I was good enough. He always looked at you the way he never looked at me. Do you know what it is like to watch your own father love your daughter more than he loved you? I felt something move inside my chest. It was not anger. It was something close to sympathy, because I did know what it was like to sit at a table and feel like someone in your family loved another person more than they loved you. I had been living that feeling my entire life. For about 20 seconds, I almost believed what I was seeing was real. I could see the little girl in Kenya who had wanted her father to be proud of her and never felt like he was. Then Kenya said, that's why I need you to understand that the house should go to Hendrik. And just like that, the 20 seconds were over. She said, because your grandfather gave you that house to hurt me, not to help you. It was punishment, and you are holding on to his punishment like it is a gift. The switch was so fast I almost got whiplash. The tears were still on her face. Her voice was still shaking, but the destination was the same place it had always been. The first dinner had been about logic and space and bedrooms. This dinner was about pain and fathers and guilt. Different door, same house. It was the most sophisticated manipulation I had ever seen her do, and the worst part was that the tears were real. The pain about Augustus was real, but she was using that real pain as a tool to get what she wanted. Hendrik spoke for the first time. He said, she's right. Grandpa always had a thing about mom. This wasn't about you. You were just the tool he used. I looked at my brother. I really looked at him, and I saw something I had been refusing to see for 33 years. Hendrik did not think of me as a person. Not really. I was a variable in a family equation that was supposed to always resolve in his favor. I said, Hendrik, do you hear yourself? He did not even blink. He said, I hear a man with 3 kids who needs a house asking his single sister to be reasonable. There it was. Reasonable. In my family, reasonable had always meant the same thing. It meant I should want less. I stood up. I did not yell. I looked at my mother, then my father, then Hendrik. I said, Augustus left me 27 specific incidents in that letter. 27 times you all chose Hendrik over me. This dinner is number 28. I'm going home. Nobody followed me to the door. I called Marisol from the road. She picked up fast. Before I could say anything, she said, I know. He texted me. He said you were being dramatic. I said, Marisol, am I being dramatic? There was a pause. Then Marisol said, you are being the first person in this family who has ever said no. That's not dramatic. That's brave. I drove the rest of the way home without saying anything else. 2 weeks went by after that second dinner. 14 days of nothing. The thing about silence from people who have never been quiet in your life is that it is not peaceful. It is loud. Then Hendrik called. It was a Tuesday evening. He did not mention the house. He did not mention the dinner. He said, hey, the kids have been asking about the backyard. Drake keeps talking about the big yard and the tree with the swing Augustus put up. I hesitated. I could hear something in the way he was asking. It was too easy, too light. But then I thought about Drake. I thought about a wife and Elmer. I said, sure, bring them over this weekend. Saturday came and Hendrik pulled into the driveway around 11 in the morning. Drake was out of the car before Hendrik even had it in park. That kid hit the grass running and went straight for the old swing that Augustus had hung from the oak tree. Hendrik walked up to the porch and nodded at me, and then he did something I was not ready for. He went inside. He did not ask if he could come in. He just walked through the back door like it was the most natural thing in the world and started moving through the house. I followed him. He walked slowly, room by room, like he was in a museum. He ran his fingers along the door frame between the living room and the hallway. He opened the hall closet. He went into the guest bedroom and stood in the middle of it and looked at the ceiling and then the windows. I felt something cold settle in my chest because I realized what I was seeing. Hendrik was not visiting. He was measuring. He was walking through my house and imagining his furniture in these rooms. He moved down the hall to the master bedroom, my bedroom. He stood in the doorway and looked at my bed. Then he said, almost to himself, like I was not even standing right behind him, this would be perfect for the kids. 2 of them could share and the third could have the room down the hall. I said, Hendrik, this is my house. He turned around and looked at me, and the thing that got me was the confusion on his face. It was real. He said, I know. I'm just saying, if things ever change. I said, they won't change. The will says they can't change. You heard Patrice. His face went tight. The casual act fell away like a mask being pulled off. He said, you know what mom said about you? She said you'd rather live alone in a 5-bedroom house than help your family. She said that's exactly the kind of person grandpa turned you into. I felt those words land. They hit me right in the spot they were designed to hit because Kenya had crafted them that way, and Hendrik had delivered them exactly the way she would have wanted, but I did not let them stick. He loaded the kids into the car and drove away. The next morning, I called Patrice. I told her about the visit. Patrice was quiet for a moment. Then she said, your grandfather told me something once. He said the hardest thing about loving someone in a broken family is that the broken family will always try to convince that person they are the one who is broken. She paused. She said, he told me that when he was writing the letter. He was thinking about you. I asked Patrice if she still had the original draft of the letter, the one before Augustus revised it. Patrice said she did. She said, the first draft was angrier. He softened it. He spent a year softening it because he wanted them to hear it, not just feel attacked by it. A year. Augustus had spent a year taking his anger and turning it into something his family might actually listen to. That night, I sat down at Augustus's kitchen table with a pen and a notebook and I wrote a letter. Not to my parents, not to Hendrik. I wrote it to Augustus. I wrote to a man who had been dead for 4 years, and I told him what his house had meant to me. I wrote for almost 2 hours. When I I was done, I folded the pages and put them in the drawer with the butterscotch candies. 3 days later, Marisol called me. It was a Wednesday evening. She said, "Something happened." Kenya called me. She asked me to convince you to sell the house and split the money. She offered me a cut. Kenya had never reached out to Marisol directly before. Not once. The fact that Kenya had picked up the phone and called Marisol herself meant only one thing. She was desperate. Marisol said, "I told her no. I told her that her daughter is the only person in this family who has ever been honest with me." She hung up. I knew. It was time to end this. All of it. I called my parents the next morning. Kenya answered. I said, "I want one final conversation. At my house. Augustus's house. You come to my home, you sit in his kitchen, and we finish this." Kenya was quiet for a beat, and then she said, "I'm not going to that house to be lectured." I said, "Then you never have to come to this house again. That's the other option." She did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Fine." They came on a Saturday morning. I had made coffee in Augustus's old percolator. I set out 3 cups on the kitchen table. The 4th chair, Augustus's chair, was empty. I left it that way on purpose. Kenya walked in, and I watched her eyes go straight to that chair, and I watched her jaw tighten. Zephyr sat down without being told. Kenya stood there. I said, "Sit down." She sat. I did not raise my voice for the entire conversation. Not once. I said, "I am going to say 5 things. You are going to listen. Then you can respond." I said, 1. The house is mine and it will remain mine. 2. I love you both and that love has cost me more than you will ever understand. 3. Augustus did not leave me this house to punish you, Mom. He left it to me because he saw me and nobody else in this family did. 4. I will not be attending Sunday dinners until you have both spent 6 months in therapy, addressing the pattern Augustus described in his letter. 5. Hendrik is welcome in my home anytime he comes as a brother and not as a man measuring my rooms. The kitchen was quiet when I finished. Kenya said, "You can't just set conditions on your own family." I said, "You set conditions on me my entire life. You just never called them that. You called them reasonable. You called them fair. Every single one of them ended with Hendrik getting more and me getting less. The only difference now is that I'm the one setting them and you don't like how it feels." Zephyr put his hand on Kenya's arm. He did it gently, like he was steadying something that was about to fall. And then he did something I had never seen him do. He said, "She's right, Kenya. She's right, and you know it." Kenya looked at him like he had slapped her. Then she looked at the empty chair. Then she looked at me. And her face did something I had never seen it do in 33 years of being her daughter. It crumbled. She said, "My father sat in that chair every morning and I never once felt like he was proud of me." I said, "And I sat at your table every night and felt the same way about you." The kitchen went completely silent. Nobody moved. Kenya did not speak for a very long time. When she finally did, her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. She said, "I don't know how to fix this." I looked at my mother sitting in my grandfather's kitchen with no script and no plan and no angle to work, and I said, "That's the first honest thing you've said in 33 years. Start there." Zephyr called me the following week and said, "I made the appointment. Your mother doesn't know I'm telling you, but I wanted you to know." 2 years have passed since then, and the therapy is still going. It is slow work. It is the hardest thing Kenya has ever done, and some days she resists it, but she has not stopped going. Hendrik and I have a careful relationship now. Not warm, not cold, careful. He came to the house last month for Awifa's birthday. He sat in Augustus's kitchen and ate cake and did not mention bedrooms. Marisol told me later that Hendrik had cried in the car on the way home but would not say why. Marisol is the family member I talk to most now. She sends me photos of Drake, Awifa, and Elmer. She calls me on Tuesday evenings. She once said, "Augustus would have liked me. I would have driven him crazy, but he would have liked me." I think she is right. I sit in Augustus's kitchen most mornings. I drink coffee from his percolator. I keep the butterscotch candies in the drawer. I do not need 5 bedrooms. I never needed 5 bedrooms. I needed one person in my family to say you are worth something, and here is my proof. Augustus said it with a house, 3 conditions, and a letter that took a year to soften. I say it to myself now every morning in his chair. I finally believe it.